All right, it is 7:30 and we are getting started now. Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. This is Sharon Harrell, the retirement coach diva for Royalty Business Group, and I am delighted to have with us this evening Felicia Hodge, who is a Maryland Master Gardener in Prince George's County. And Felicia's going to come to us today talking about food deserts and being a master gardener and what all that means to us. So before we get started with Felicia and telling us about how she got started in this, just want to let you know that you are to put your comments in the chat. Make sure that you put your questions in the chat so we can address those. Also, we want to make sure that if you miss any of these lives, you can always go to my YouTube channel, which is Royalty Business Group, and make sure you like and subscribe in my YouTube channel. Share this information because it is powerful. So, Felice, tell us about yourself. Tell us how you got started with being a master gardener. What does that mean?
Good evening, Sharon. Thank you so much for having me. Um, I got started growing when I was about 8 years old in the country. I would spend my summers in the country in Georgia. And so my family there had about an acre and a half, and they grew for themselves and their community. So when I would go down there in the summer, I would help them. And that kind of ignited my passion for growing. Um, I got some of the best eating during the summers as well. It was much different from what I was accustomed to growing up in the city. So it's like, I'm a native Washingtonian. So I'm familiar with, both sides of it, which really kind of motivated me to go into urban farming because it is a little different when you get into our neck of the woods. It's not as rural and the environment is slightly different. But I've been exposed to so many people that have been able to grow in so many different various, from their methods to the environment and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that I would say is probably the biggest part of what I do now is
Mhm.
studying different ways to help people grow in any environment. Some people think you have to have like 5 acres in order to be able to grow something, but
Right.
really, I mean, you can grow practically anywhere.
Mm.
In terms of getting started, I really just, got thrown into it
Mhm.
and been growing ever since.
Okay, yeah, that Southern food is always different. It's always been much different and better for us. We always want more of it. Anytime we go down south, we always want more of that food. But tell me about like urban gardening. Like, what does urban gardening look like? You said, people have an idea of like you got to live on the outskirts, but urban gardening really isn't about that. So tell us, what is that about?
Well, there's so many different ways you can look at it. A lot of people have been doing like indoor gardens, deck gardens. Some people have, tents, outside and inside. If you do want to do like sort of the hoop houses, you could have those outside, or you can set up tents indoors. A lot of people do those to grow year round, or you will have like a sunroom or solarium type situation. But the greenhouses are good for anyone that's interested in growing. And they come in all different sizes. Anybody that's interested in growing or extending their growing year.
Mhm.
Since our weather here in the DMV is so, back and forth.
Right.
But
Mhm.
there are just so many different, you can do potted gardens, the potted gardens give you a lot more flexibility, where you can grow outdoors and then transition them inside if needed. Or it's used to kind of contain some plants that may get invasive otherwise, like mint.
Mhm.
Um, So those are some of the different techniques. I mean, you get into like aquaculture and horticulture, those sorts of things where people use like the aquaponics, where they don't
Mm,
necessarily grow on soil. They'll use either, you know, it'll be sort of like an aquarium setup
yeah.
underneath it, and then you would grow on top of that. Vertical gardens is another way. You'll see a lot of those structures online. They're very popular for people that have limited space, where you sort of grow up. So it's like a tower setup. Um, a lot of people have been doing growth art.
Oh,
Well, they'll have like growth panels.
uh-huh.
Sometimes you see moss gardens, or you'll see people grow their herbs that way. Well, they'll grow it in their house, and it kind of turn it into like a painting type situation, but it's
Oh,
really art. I mean, it's really it's really food, but they
right.
do it in an artistic way.
Okay.
Um, there are so many different way. I mean, people are just throwing gardens together in their backyard, especially if you have land of it, any amount
Mhm.
of land. And a lot of people have gotten into the pollinator craze. We had it was getting pretty scary for a while, especially in our area with
Mhm.
pollinators. So there was an added incentive for people to plant things that attract bees, butterflies, hummingbirds, and that sort of stuff. So
Mhm.
if you're into flowers, or if you like any of those, then that's another thing. um
Right.
Then with COVID, a lot of people got into houseplants, specifically the ones that help with indoor air.
Oh, okay.
So there's a listing. It's a NASA listing. I don't know how long it's been since it came out, but there's a listing of plants. I'm pretty sure you've probably seen one or more of them that
Mhm.
help with cleaning indoor air. So that there's the possibilities are endless.
Okay. Okay. Well, you know what? We will have a whole webinar on that alone, but we came to talk about these food deserts. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this with you is because, we've had conversations, and I was visiting my son in Memphis, and that's something he brought up in the side of Memphis that he works. He was saying how they're food deserts. It's a low economic area. And he mentioned that. And as we were driving, I didn't see any real grocery stores, right? We had those corner stores that you walk in, that you can buy the chips and you can buy the sodas. And then in the back, they got a little thing where you can get maybe a few eggs, a little bit of this, just a little bit to grab, almost like they have at the dollar stores, right? You can go in the dollar store now and get just about anything. So I wanted to talk about what a food desert is, and how that's affecting us financially and with our health. So, and then we get a Del Rio on in the comments. She was like, "Wow, how do you get that list of plants that clean the air?" So, if you could tell us about where that's located again, the plant
I
list.
don't know the specific. Tell them to Google it. Google the
Okay.
NASA indoor air plant list.
Okay.
I know spider plants is one, snake plants. It's a few of them, but they're the cheapest, probably healthiest air filters you can find. And I
Okay.
know that was a big one for COVID. People were looking at ways to keep, filter their air. So yeah,
Okay. So you said
Google
that.
that listing. But it was done by NASA.
Okay. So the NASA indoor plant list. All right. So we make sure that people get that information so they can find those plants. So tell us about what's a food desert? What's considered a food desert? What's the definition?
Well, before you even consider what a food desert is, you have to look at the determination of what's considered food.
Mm,
So there's like a variation, like it really depends on who you ask.
hmm.
But for the sake of this conversation and discussing food deserts, there's a certain nutrient content involved. So it's not just about eating things that taste good or eating things that you have a craving for. when they're talking about food deserts, they're talking about having access to foods that provides nutrients to sustain your bodily functions, to
Mhm.
help your body with its growth and with its progress. And um, so typically that's, fresh food, whether it's, depending on your diet, I know we might have some vegans on the call and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
it can be produce, it can be, fresh meat, it can be, whatever have you, but those are generally perishables. So
Mm.
we're not really talking about, the canned foods, anything in a can or a box or plastic, like sealed plastic, 9, 7, 10, that's not what we're referring to. Things that are perishable. So
Okay.
that's your fruit, your vegetables, your produce and your meats primarily.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay.
So
And
when
so,
you say food desert, what
mhm.
they're referring to is they're they're capturing an area where
Mhm.
there's a substantial amount of difficulty associated with access to those items.
Okay. Okay.
So there's a food map. It's the Food Access Research Atlas
Mhm.
online, and it's provided to give you sort of the data is not in real time. It's about 2 or 3 years back. But when they identify food deserts on that site, they're looking at a certain demographic. They're looking at the income because
Mhm.
they're using income as a potential factor on having
Mhm.
access to food.
Mhm.
They're looking at the distance between the different places that provide what is
Mhm.
considered food. For the sake of this, again, I don't want to throw, I don't want to throw any type of jabs that, the canned or boxed or any of that, but this is
Mhm.
specifically for produce. So they're not necessarily looking at the convenience stores.
Right.
They're going
Right.
to be looking at full produce providing um, places. So
Mhm.
they're going to look at what's the distance between those different places. So if someone has to have transportation to get to the grocery store, if they have to have a car, if
Mhm.
they can't walk less than a mile, if they can't walk at all,
Right.
these are things that they're going to say are hindrances to them obtaining access to that food. And that's the type of things that this atlas will capture. And that's what people use to determine whether they are in an area that is considered a food desert. So, food deserts are areas where you would have to have pretty much a car to get
Mhm.
access to, you got to think about that. And then so the poverty level is incorporated in that
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
let's just say they don't have a car. So then that can turn into a 40 or $50 Uber ride just to go to the
Yeah.
grocery store.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas there are some people that are less than a mile to multiple different stores.
Mhm.
Um, so that's what that captures. And so when they identify something as a food desert, that's basically for the community. So you can get active with your community elected officials. You can reach out to the different stores that are prevalent in your area and
Mhm.
try to get them to provide more stores. We've seen that being done in Capitol Heights, over in the Addison Road area.
Mhm.
They lost their last grocery store for a while, and it
Right.
took quite a bit of, and I believe those articles are still online as well. If anyone wants to look at that as sort of as a case study for what communities really have to go through in order to make a full push
Mhm.
for more resources. Um, but it does work. It does get the attention of
Mhm.
different stores and different, because I mean, at the end of the day, that's an opportunity for them to make money. So they
Right.
do pay attention to that and they do look at that. Another option is farmers markets. A
Mm.
lot of them have been sort of coming up in various different areas, which have been designated as food deserts, even though it's not going to be necessarily a year round solution all of the times.
Mhm.
It can help, especially if you want to get access to produce that you could possibly freeze or, something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were just talking because I know for myself, I'll buy, fresh produce and then I'll forget it's in there and then it'll go bad. So I try to make sure that I cook it and then bag it into portions and freeze it so I don't have to, like defrost the whole thing. But going back to something that you said, which was about the area, how, and getting to it. So normally when we think about, at least this is I'll just say for myself, about being in a food desert, it would be where it's in a, like you said, a low economic area. You think of urban areas, but when I thought more about it, as you were giving the definition, because people may not have the access to get to those locations, it could be in a rural area
Hmm.
that where people can't to get to those places that they need to because they don't have the transportation or the money to pay for the transportation. Like you said, it might cost $50 to get to take an Uber to the grocery store. You can't really buy much from the grocery store now that's going to be less than $100 almost. And then you got to, so you're spending almost $200 and half of that is on transportation. So when
Yep.
you think about you taking that all into effect, that's hitting your pocket.
Hmm.
And then if you go to the stores that are in your area that have those processed foods that you can pick up real quick, the canned foods, the frozen foods, even the meats, then you're risking your health. It's not going to be that food that's going to be good for you, even though it tastes good to you.
Well,
So
there's a place for that. There's a place for that. Lord knows I love Oreos, but you can't live off those alone. And here's the thing, I think the main issue with regards to health in these areas that are designated as food deserts is that there's very little to no access to that food,
Mhm.
or it's very difficult to obtain. So, having that option and that variety is very key to, I mean, okay, you might want to eat some things but having to eat um meals that are, contain a lot of the chemicals that are in some of the
Mhm.
boxed foods and the preservatives and stuff like that consistently over an extended amount of time can take a toll on you, health
Mhm.
wise. And so, that's another factor that they look at in terms of, when they look at what the overall and long-term effects of food deserts going unaddressed in various communities. It does often lead to like what's called the top five, heart disease. And most if not all of these, aside from, instances where they are hereditary or genetic,
Right.
you know, most of these are preventable, from, the heart disease, that whole trio, strokes, heart
Mhm.
attacks,
Mhm.
um, all those heart related ailments, cancers, the various different forms,
Mhm.
from diabetes to different organ failures, liver and kidney and stuff like that. A lot of that is preventable, and diet is a key factor in those, ailments.
Right.
So that's when you start looking at long term. I mean, it's not just health wise; it's financial, just like you
Yeah.
mentioned.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when you are looking at these various different foods, what a lot of people don't realize, and what I didn't even know until I was in my mid-20s, is
Mhm.
that it is possible to be, obese and malnutrition. I was having just back and forth, just my stomach was bothering me. And I
Uh-huh.
went to a nutritionist and I discovered that. And what she revealed to me is that you can, if you don't get enough nutrients in your diet,
Mhm.
your body will just keep prompting you to eat. So
Oh, okay.
you may not really be hungry, but your body is searching for these nutrients. So it's just going to keep you eating, 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 which is going to
Hmm.
cost you more and more and more. And when
Right.
I started eating foods that were higher in nutrients, um, that kind of
That,
way you would get more satisfaction from your meals.
okay,
So
okay.
there's definitely a correlation to all of
Uh-huh.
it, from having access to nutrients in your food to looking at the financial component to looking at the health component. It's
Right.
all kind of tied together. And
Yeah,
the longer that these communities that are designated as food deserts continue to remain food deserts, that's when you start to see the long-term impacts in those communities.
exactly, exactly. Because so before I go into that, I want people to continue to type their questions. Make sure you're sharing this information to others by clicking share so they can jump on and listen and provide their comments. But Del Rio, I'm going to ask your question and say your comment, and that is about organic foods and vegetables versus just regular fresh foods and vegetables. Um, what is the difference when they talk about organic and then other vegetables and fruits?
Well, the main difference generally comes from how it's grown.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there is a substantial amount of produce that is available in the commercial market now that is considered GMO.
Mm-hmm.
So GMO meaning genetically modified organisms. Um, and it's pretty much when you purchase organic, that's being grown by an organization that has been certified to grow organic food. So there
Mm-hmm.
is a review process and there's a vetting that comes along with having a producer, meaning a farmer or a farm, being designated to be able to grow organic food. So it's pretty rigorous and they go through
Mm-hmm.
that. But once they're certified as an organic grower, then
Mm-hmm.
they are able to move forward. And so basically, when you say that produce is organic, it's basically designating that that has been grown by either an individual or an organization that has been certified to be able to grow organic food. And it just speaks to the method, in general, the approach that they
Okay.
use with the produce. It's usually natural, if any,
Mm-hmm.
pesticides, and then they will use original forms of the seeds. So they will use either organic or heirloom, which is heirloom is refers to seeds that were collected prior, a species of a seed that was collected prior to the designation between GMO, before GMO and organic and all that showed up
Uh-huh.
on the scene.
Okay.
You know, so
Okay.
the seeds from like stuff from like the 1700s and 1800s, that was
Right.
before all of that. So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
they just kind of grandfathered in. So a lot of people
Okay.
gravitate towards um, produce that is either heirloom or organic.
Okay. And the comment that you made about being obese and being malnutrition. So I can see that, because it's a cycle. And what it would be is that you want something to eat, you get what you go to the closest store, whatever, you get that, but it doesn't have the nutrition in it. So you eat and then you're still hungry, or you think you're still hungry, and you go back, you're still getting that because you don't know. And so you keep going back. And so therefore you are eating and you're gaining weight, but you're not getting the nutrients in your body from the foods that you're eating. So you're spending that money. It actually sounds like they have a racket going on and they probably know what they're doing, but they're not going to tell you this is the process. That yeah, we know that you're going to keep coming back to us because the food that you are giving to us, or we're giving to you is not healthy. So you're going to keep
It's
coming
really
back.
not though. And it's and you know why I say
Mhm.
that it's not a racket?
Uh-huh.
It's because it's like, you know how they say when you go to the grocery store, you shouldn't go grocery shopping hungry.
Right, right,
It's
right,
right there. If you
right.
look, it's right there. It's we're just not
Mhm.
paying attention. When I first started um watching what I ate, I
Mhm.
lost so much weight because I just lost my appetite. I
Mhm.
just all the stuff that I was looking for because basically what they told me is high fructose corn syrup, MSG, all these different things, right? They say,
Right.
read the labels and because I had eaten myself into pre-diabetes and I
Mm.
had to start, this carb lower carbs. I had to really start paying attention
Right,
to
right.
the labels, and everything that I was eating either had one or both, have
Mhm.
one or all the natural flavors. That's
Right.
like this random ingredient that nobody
Uh-huh.
knows what it is specifically, but it's like,
Right.
so once you start paying attention
Mhm.
to what you're actually eating, I guarantee you the majority, especially if you're getting tested for any of the top five, I
Yeah.
promise you that if you just don't switch up what you're eating at first, just look at what you're eating and look at the ingredients, and you'll see it's just riddled with high fructose corn syrup and MSG, monosodium glutamate, something like that, and natural flavors.
Yeah. I don't know what was just going on with my my thing, but um
And
yeah,
that's what
so
happened. And that's
yeah.
what happened. So what happened is my body was looking for nutrients and it was getting all these other things. And
Right.
so it's saying, no, I wanted that.
Right. Right. Right.
And that's what I had to do. I had to just kind of reshape how I fed my body. For when you start to feed your body for what it wants instead of what you might want,
Mhm.
then you're in the flow.
Yes, yes. And so and you're correct. So they tell you to is it you shop on the outside? No. You shop on the inside. When you go to the grocery store, they tell you not people in the grocery store, but it's been said that you should shop like the fruits and vegetables are on the outside. And then instead of going inside, I think of the aisles where everything else is right. Thank you, Miss Rosa. You shop on the outside. But I guess what you're saying is whether you shop on the outside perimeter or inside, where you're looking at the different things that you are eating, you need to read the labels to make sure that it has what you want or has what you need rather instead of what you want. Because if we get everything we want, then we're going to be obese and malnutrition. But I would say that
No, I'm not saying that. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
uh,
I'm saying start keep it because we did a study with the bell peppers,
mhm,
right? So if you have a bell pepper in your house right now, you
mhm.
have enough to plant a quarter of an acre of bell peppers in your possession right now.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying if you have cucumbers and you have a cucumber in your house right now, you have enough to plant a half acre of cucumbers. So essentially what I'm saying is that if you don't have a green thumb, from the financial standpoint, if you have never desired to become a farmer for hobby or financial reasons, I mean,
Right.
it's a I think they estimated it at 290. You want to talk about finances? I think they estimated the farming industry at 293 billion estimated this year.
Mm,
And that's just farming in general. So that's meat,
mhm,
produce, all together.
mhm.
There's money. It's huge money in farming because it's an essential
Right.
industry. It's never going to
Right.
go out of business. So any of you that have land, that don't mind getting your hands in the dirt, even if you want to parcel some land to some local farmers, because in DMV especially, land access is so difficult because there's not but so much land we're all kind of condensed in. But
Yeah.
I'm saying that you can start right where you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's the weather's getting ready to get nice. Go get you some pots, go get you some, if you got a couple little area in your backyard for, some tomatoes or something. I usually encourage people that have never grown before to start with what you have, because seeds can get pretty pricey. So I usually encourage people to grow from what they have, even if it is GMO. I mean, if you grow it yourself, it will be
Mm-hmm.
healthier than, anything that would have like, pesticides or anything on it potentially. So just
Right.
start with what you have. Start right where you are. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
the growing, if you don't have any desire to grow, collect those seeds and take them to a farmer's market. Look up some farmers in your area and donate those seeds. When I did farming for business,
Right.
I accepted seed donations. You'll be surprised. I know a lot of farmers in this area that would be happy to have them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so don't think that you have to like, go out and buy a tractor and 10 acres like you literally could start right where you are right now.
Right.
Um,
So, and so let's segue into that just a minute, because I want to just read out Del Rio's comment, which Del Rio said she thought MSG was a seasoning and it's bad for you. And my sister used to always buy MSG when there was Murray's. That's what she would always buy, MSG, when we go to Murray's. So, but now we know that that's not good for you. But so I want to segue into the farming aspect that you brought up, because one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking is that we go to the store, whether it's a local like I said, convenience store, or we're going into Giant or Safeway or whatever, Walmart, we still are in a habit to pick up certain things because that's what we normally pick up. And then because we are buying those things that we have a habit of buying, that we are affecting our health, we're affecting our finances. And even though it's not really a racket, as you said, it's a cycle. And we have to
yes.
change our mindset. We have to change how we think about our food, because then we're going to be going to the doctor a lot. We're going to have to be going to multiple doctors because we're going to have different situations, different ailments with us. So I do want to hear from you, like, what does it mean? Like you told us about, mentioned that you are a master gardener. So
Mhm.
what does that mean? What program is that, that you became a master gardener? So if anybody's interested in knowing more about that, how they can do that, and then how they can have maybe their own garden where they are.
Okay, awesome. So, I mean, it's a great program. Well, with part of the reason why I got into the Master Gardener program, even though I had been growing since I was a child, was because, like I said, I kind of went down there for the summer.
Mhm.
So when I started to really get into like fully into growing, I realized that there were parts of the process that I missed. I just basically got there for the maintenance and the harvesting. I
Mhm.
didn't know about what happened, the prep that happened before that, or what happens, throughout the process. So there were gaps in my understanding of the entire farming process. And that was what made this program ideal for me, because I didn't want to pursue like a full degree in it. I just wanted to have an understanding of the entire growth process. So
Mhm.
it's pretty rigorous for a hobby, but I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, it's continuing education, honestly. It's
Mhm.
ongoing. It's for as long as you want to be a part of the organization. I went through the University of Maryland. master gardeners for Prince George's County. And
Mhm.
so I can provide the contact information for our coordinator. They usually have a cycle, usually annually or a couple of times a year. I'm not
Mhm.
sure when the next session is, but I can provide the information if anyone wants it. And basically, you go through, there's a training component, so there's actual study
Mhm.
and there's an exam that you have to complete, and then there is a community service component. So you would have to commit to doing all of those.
Okay.
And the community service, once you pass the exam and you complete the study portion of it, it is like I did a virtual because I went through it during the pandemic, but some of them are hybrid and some of them are 100% on site. And it's
Mhm.
my understanding that most states do have master gardeners. So even if there's someone that's not in Maryland, it's not a program that's strictly for Maryland. You would just have to find the school that will be hosting it in your state.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so there's Master Gardener in Maryland. There's Master Gardener set up in each county. So even if there's someone in Maryland that, because I know they have Master Gardeners in DC too.
Okay.
Um, and so basically, once you complete the study portion of it and you pass the exam, then you and there's a for Maryland there is a um you do have to pay for the classes and stuff like that. So there is a
Mhm.
fee. It's not outlandish. It's not the equivalent of going to college. But there is a fee associated with it and there is a community service component. So you do have to do, a certain amount of community hours and that's ongoing. So as long as you're a part
Okay.
of the program, then you do have to complete your community service.
And then people who are interested in there in other states, they can just kind of do some research and look it up to see where they can find that same type of program and
Yep.
where they're located. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
just Google Master Gardener for your state and
Mhm.
see what comes up because they have them. They have them all over the
So
US.
yeah, so that's good to know. So you mentioned earlier, and let me just go back and reintroduce you for those who might have joined late. This is Felicia Hodge, and she is a Maryland Master Gardener in Prince George's County. We've been talking about food deserts. We're talking about how we can better our health by understanding where we are, where these food deserts might be within our area, what the food desert actually is, because as we learned, just because there are food locations near you doesn't mean that you're in a food desert, but it doesn't mean that you're not in a food desert. So you have to understand what that is. And again, I'm sharing with Royalty Business Group. So we're talking about now, want to segue into how someone could create their own garden. So for instance, I live in apartments, and if I wanted to have a herb garden, what would you recommend?
1 second. My phone's ringing. Sorry about that.
No worries, somebody's trying to get some information.
It's fine. So basically what I would recommend that anyone that wants to start a garden could just start where you are. Like I said, save your seeds, generate that garden from where you are now. Typically when I would do consultations with people, I would get an idea of what they are actually looking to grow and start a realistic listing of what, because some everything doesn't grow here. So that's the
Mm,
first thing. In the DMV, the majority of our area is under the USDA zone 7A, if I'm not mistaken. So when you're starting to look at what you want to grow, um, that will be the first thing. What will grow here?
mhm,
Um, so when you see, what to grow outside, then you can look and see, okay, of those things, what can I grow here? And then, if it's something you want to grow here that doesn't typically grow here, then that's when you can look into, possibly doing greenhouses or um, something like that. Sorry. Give me 1 second.
Sure, sure. So just want to make sure that everyone knows that if you missed any of this information or any of the past lives that we've been doing, just go to my YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe. So every time I upload one's there for you. You can go back
All
and
right.
look at the ones in the past. It's Royalty Business Group on YouTube. And again, I'm Sharon, financial coach, and we have Felicia, the master gardener. So yeah, tell us more about how we can start our own gardens.
Absolutely. So I would encourage you to, start where you are. You can look into, I know quite a few people that are farmers in this area that have volunteer hours where you can come in and get hands-on and have someone such as me, or you can have someone that is skilled with gardening to kind of you'll be able to like shadow them or assist them with growing on their sites. One site that I know that I've worked with before is New Brooklyn Farms in Mount Rainier.
Mhm,
They usually have volunteer hours a couple of times a month. The farming incubator in Watkins Park, there's a lot of farmers that are over there that offer volunteer hours as well. So if you are new to it and you would prefer to have like some guidance on how to get started and stuff like that, a lot of
mhm,
farmers can use the extra hands and feet, and they will answer your questions. They'll show you whatever you need to know in exchange for, receiving that help and that assistance with, sort of hands on deck with growing on their sites. Another good way would be to consider, like we talked about with the Master Gardener program in your area.
mhm,
Get coordinated or get familiar with some of the people in the farmers markets in your area. That's another good way to connect with local farmers. You can get access to fresh produce. A lot of times you'll find fresh meat, fresh seafood, and you'll also get access to a lot of different like farmers that are producers for other farmers. So I know of one specifically in this area that is a huge producer for other farmers. All she does is grow plants for other farmers. So, and then she basically has what she has left at these farmers markets. So, you can go to your local farmers markets and get connected. If you're looking for any of those, I've worked personally with the Capital Market. They're out of Capitol Heights and Suitland.
mhm,
Loy's Farmers Market, they're out of Glendale, Maryland. There's farmers markets in Riverdale. I believe Riverdale and Greenbelt both have farmers markets. And there's
mhm,
also for the Charles County residents, there's also Waldorf has a farmers market out there as well. I work with them all. So they're all pretty
okay,
good. They have a good variety, a wide range of different producers that come through consistently. Um, so I mean, there's just so many different ways that you can get connected if you want to kind of get a start into the farming industry. But the main thing I would say is to just really give yourself some time to get acclimated
mhm.
because a lot of people they get one house plant from Home Depot and it dies and they're like, I can't do this,
That's me. That is me. I
and
do not like plants.
It's
They
but
don't usually
it's
work for
really
me.
never that. It's really
Mhm,
just you have to understand. I mean, anytime, and I'll give you this tip, anybody that is spending a small fortune, just get some new dirt. The dirt
mhm.
that's in the commercial plants usually needs to be replaced. That's one of the main reasons why I see people that get commercial plants then when they don't live.
Okay.
It's usually the dirt just needs to be replaced with like some better soil.
Mhm.
Um, and then a lot of times people, they their grass doesn't grow and they're just like, I'm terrible at it. It's grass is different. Grass is
Right.
different than growing food. So, I would just say, don't be discouraged by any issues you may have had in the past with growing
Uh-huh.
and just, give yourself that opportunity. Um, for those of anyone on the call that may have land or have access to land, I would encourage you to get a soil test. That's usually a
Uh-huh.
good start. Um, you can usually find someone in your area, link up with your environmental organizations, or
Mhm.
PG County has a very strong soil conservation department, and they're always willing to assist or help, that sort of thing. Um, the only other thing I would say is to just start, get excited about farming in general. I mean,
Mhm.
that's how it was done by,
Yeah.
the people that were before us. They grew what they needed. And I think we're capable. We just need a little bit of we just need a little bit of encouragement.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. So I do want to kind of go back to the food desert, and I know that you mentioned, explain to us how we would know a food desert, but if you could tell us where in the local area are food deserts, because I'm sure there are plenty of people who are online or who are going to listen later on, watch on the YouTube channel or through Facebook, and they're going to think, well, I don't live in a food desert. So if you could just share where the food deserts are within this area.
Um, that's a difficult question to answer based on the data that is available, and I'm gonna tell you why.
Mhm.
So the food access research atlas that I mentioned previously,
Mhm.
it is a detailed study, but it's also a couple of years old. So it's possible that some of the areas that may be showing as a food desert
Mhm.
have been addressed by now.
Okay.
Um, it's also possible that some areas that didn't show as a food desert have now become one because during the pandemic,
Mhm.
a lot of businesses closed.
Right.
So it's basically about, this like the difference between when you're cooking and you're doing a recipe and you measure it to the nines versus when you just kind of dash it in.
Uh-huh.
There are signs. So if you're concerned about that, that'd be the first thing I would say to look at.
Mhm. Mhm.
Excuse me. The first sign I would encourage you to look at is just roughly how long does it take you to go to the store?
Mhm. 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 To get the quality food
Yeah,
that
generally in the car, how long does it take you?
mhm. Okay.
That's the first sign. If you're looking at, 10, 15-minute car drive,
No worries. You told me. Yeah. Um, and so just understanding that if you have to drive more than 10 minutes to get to a grocery store that has quality food, then you could be in a food desert.
if it's 15, 20 minutes or more, yeah,
You could be in a food desert. Okay,
it's
so
possible.
it's possible. Yeah. So and then also we keep in mind about our own health when it comes to those locations, what type of foods are there that we're picking up. Make sure that we're reading the label so it can have the nutrients that we need in order to live a healthy life as long as we are able and capable to do that. So one of the questions that came into the chat is that um, the person says, when we tried tomatoes, I guess they tried to grow tomatoes, we had bugs. How do we combat that?
One of the key areas that I looked into when I became really active with the excuse me, with the master gardeners was pest management, because that is an area that has impacted our our community pretty heavily. So one thing I would suggest is with the tomatoes, you can cover them. Sometimes you can use crop fabric, and sometimes you can utilize neem. It really would depend. The first thing you want to do is determine what it is, what pests are going there. That's how you will really determine how to best address them.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's a couple of different ways you can do it, but I mean, I honestly, we're when you're growing outside, you're growing in their environment. So the
Mhm.
key thing is to just make sure that you navigate, because the main thing you want to do is make sure that the positive, the insects that have a positive impact on the growth of your food are able to access it. And so that's the downside. It's like a delicate, very delicate
Mhm.
dance. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, you need to get educated on which pests are invading your plants. That's the best way to determine, you know, how to address it.
And
If
that
it's
would be for inside and outside, right? Because we could have, we could be growing inside, because you mentioned about the art that's actual, plants or food, um, if we have that inside, then we are subject to having some type of pest that might invade those plants, those gardens inside the home as well.
yeah, you definitely want to get savvy on navigating pest management in a natural way when you want to grow your own food, because that's a real thing. Um, I would just encourage you to really just kind of get familiar with the pests that are impacting your plants.
Hmm.
Because like I said, it really would depend on what it is of how you could best address it. So like I just went out like a couple of weeks ago and put some citrus peels down. Those help to deter ants.
Mm.
Irish Spring is another way. Irish Spring shavings help
Mm.
deter, the bigger pests. So squirrels, mice, a lot of they just don't like the smell. Um,
Okay.
there's different ways you can do it. Like I said, if you would have to look and see on the plant, are they actually going after the fruit? Are they in the soil? Are they on the leaves? Um, you just have to
Mm.
familiarize yourself with them to know how to address them.
Okay, yeah, that means we might have to go to that master gardener class
A
and
lot
learn.
of this stuff you can just Google, honestly.
Right, yeah.
But if you're serious about, increasing your knowledge about growing, and we have Ask a Master Gardener at various different farmers markets and stuff, and different
Mm.
fairs. Those plant clinics are available. You can request plant clinics online. You can send your questions in,
Hmm.
excuse me, through the University of Maryland to Ask a Master Gardener. So
Okay.
take some pictures and send those in. Otherwise you can go out to the farmers markets, and sometimes, people will bring their plants. They'll just bring they'll bring their house plant and say, "What's wrong with this?" Or you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
hey, that's the best way to do it. If you can bring it to them, then they can see it versus you trying to explain, what the issue is. It's like going to the doctor, you call a doctor and you tell them your issues, and they're like, you have to come in.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. I can see that being the same thing. So you have given us a wealth of information this evening, Miss Felicia, and I truly appreciate it. And so if anyone was interested in getting some advice or guidance from you directly, is there a way that they can contact you?
Absolutely. I will give you my email. I mean, well, you got my info. I'm working on a new website that's going to be established as a interactive platform.
Mhm.
So that will be available soon, and that registration will be available. It's going to be basically just covering, similar topics like this, a lot of the frequently asked questions about not only using plants for, generating food sources, but for using plants for personal care.
Okay, well, if you don't mind just sharing your email address to our attendees now so they can capture it, because I might not be able to get back to them directly. So if you want to just let us know what that is. And Miss Rosa said this was very interesting and informative. You know, Miss Rosa.
Hey, Miss Rosa.
And yes, so
Okay, so yeah, you can email me at Miss Felice HD, MsFelicehd@gmail.com.
great. I just dropped it in the chat on Facebook chat. So, and she said, "Hey, Felicia." So
What you grow?
everyone,
What you gonna grow, Miss Rosa? You gotta grow something this year now. She
that's right.
said.
Yeah, she got to grow something. Take a picture of it and send it in to you.
Yeah, it's really easy. That would be my key thing is just don't get intimidated and start where you are. Now, in terms of the food deserts, I don't have the actual link for that food access atlas,
Okay.
but like I said, if you look at how long it takes you to get to the grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
also the other thing you want to look at is your food selection. So if you find that the produce is getting lower and lower and lower, or you find less facilities that provide the fresh, produce and meat,
Mm-hmm.
then that's when you would start to want to, maybe contact your community activists and stuff like that.
Okay. Okay. And something I meant to bring up earlier was when you mentioned about the meat. Um, and you were saying that it's not so much, it's not the packaged meat because that's normally processed. So like if we go to like the Amish market or something with the meat there, that would be healthy. Or to if we go into the grocery store where you can get cut like deli meat and things like that, then that would be better for us versus getting the chicken that's in the sitting over in the freezer section or things like that.
Well, I mean, the Amish market is just like another instance of a fresh fruit market, and the
Mhm.
theory behind the Amish market, along with the farmers markets that I mentioned, and when they have their meat producers and stuff like that, is that it just takes the wait time away. So part of the thing about obtaining the maximum amount of nutrients for your food and why growing food that eating food that you've grown is a lot healthier is because if you get it directly from the ground, that's what the farm to table movement is about, then
Mhm.
you would have access to the highest amount of nutrients in the food. So the longer the food sits after you've harvested, then the amount of nutrients in it slowly diminish.
Okay.
So when you buy commercial food from the store, that's what makes it different from buying it from a farmer, because you will have it within a day or so versus having it within a week or, possibly
Mhm.
longer. So the nutrient count would potentially be higher.
Okay, all right. Well, that's some good stuff. You have given us a wealth of information, and I truly appreciate it.
But you know what? You were asking me about the meats. So the other
Uh,
thing with the meats is, having that same access to fresh meat
right.
versus having it, to be frozen, or it's not that the other meat isn't healthy, but if it's frozen or if it sits,
Hmm.
and a lot of the meats that are from those markets, they don't have as much chemical exposure.
Okay, all right. That sounds good. So, yeah, try to get our meats fresh vegetables. Either case, we can cook them and then freeze them and then bring them out and learn how to preserve our vegetables like they used to do um back in the day. Not me.
Oh, canning is very popular now.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just starting to see those see the mason jars and things in the store more often now. So yes, definitely. Um we might have to get you to come back and talk more about how we can move forward with this movement and making sure that we are healthy because as we know, our health affects our finances. I mean, we have to buy more medicines, we have to go to the doctor more often, we go to multiple doctors. Everybody doesn't have great health care. So that means that you might be in the emergency room more often, having to go to the hospital about different visits. And unfortunately, people dying younger from not having the proper nutrients. As we learned, you can be obese and still not have the proper nutrients in it. So we are at the top of the hour for our time. Again, I thank you so much, Felicia, for being with us this evening. Felicia, a master gardener in Prince George's County, and you dropped into the chat. I'm gonna drop it in one more time for if anybody who wants to get in touch with you, they can email you and ask you any questions that you might have.
I think we got some master gardeners out there. I'm waiting to hear from them.
Yeah, they're going to hear from you. You're going to hear from them. You're going to hear from them. They're going to flood you with questions. And make sure that you share this information with others. And if you aren't able to get the full information today, make sure just in a couple of days, it'll be on my YouTube channel. So you can go back and look at this as well as past episodes. So next month, I will be talking to Daryl Holloman. He has a nonprofit for young people called WAVE, and it is phenomenal. So we want to talk to Daryl and his nonprofit that he has for young people in DC, Maryland, Virginia, and how that's he's moving and shaking and making some things going on. So I look forward for you all to come back next month on May. I don't know what the date is right now. It's going to be the second Wednesday in May at 7:30 Eastern time. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Felicia, and you have a great evening.
Thank you, Sharon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.